The characteristics of life with Miss Maynard. In this video, we're going to look at how we can distinguish between organisms which are living, what we call biotic, or non-living, which we call abiotic. So quite often you will hear different acronyms and mnemonics depending on where you are being educated, what textbooks are being used and things like that, which these different acronyms or mnemonics are all there to help you remember the characteristics that prove living organisms are biotic. Okay, so in this video we're kind of going to focus on Mr. Engro, but we're also going to follow Mrs. Gren through it as well, as they're two of the more popular acronyms used. As you can see, we've got Mr. Sainsbury grows enormous nectarines there, and we've got can good old sunshine really ravage cells daily. So the last two being mnemonics and the top two being acronyms. So let's follow Mr. Engro and Mrs. Gren. So introducing Mr. Engro and Mrs. Gren in the top left-hand corner there. She looks extremely friendly. Alrighty, so what we're looking at here are these characteristics of life. Okay, so when we look at Mr. Engro, we're looking at movement, reproduction, nutrition, growth, response, excretion, waste and water. With Mrs. Gren, some of these are then incorporated together. Okay, so we've got movement the same, we've got reproduction the same, we've got sensitivity, which is just a different take on response, we've got growth the same, we've got respiration. Okay, now in Mr. Engro we've got excretion. Okay, so we cover respiration and excretion with Mr. Engro and a bit in water. Okay, so respiration just captures things in a different way. It's not that one way is right or wrong, they're just different. Okay, both of them we've got excretion, and then both we have nutrition. Okay, with Mr. Engro we've got that nutrition, growth, response, excretion, waste and water. So they just capture things in a different way. Alright, so both Mrs. Gren and Mr. Engro start off with movement. So what this is telling us is all living organisms move. Now some are what we call locomotive, such as animals that can move from place to place, or some are stationary or static, for example our plants. Now if you ever see a field of sunflowers, if you go and look at them at one time of the day, it will all look yellow, like that field of sunflowers we're looking at. Go later on in the day and it will just look green, because the sunflower's head turns to look at the sun as such. It's a response to the sun, but the sunflower is moving. So all biotic organisms move to some extent in some way. All of our biotic organisms reproduce. Okay, they have the ability to produce genetically identical or similar offspring. Now there's two types of reproduction. It can be sexual, where they have two parent organisms. In this case we get a slight bit of variation in terms of genetics, because you get the genetics from both of the parent organisms. Asexual reproduction, that only has one parent organism, so there's no variation in the genetics, and therefore that's where we get clones. Okay, now both Mrs. Gren and Mr. Engro had nutrition. Now all living organisms require carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals to survive, and each of those food types have got different uses in each organism, but all organisms need carbohydrates for energy. They need proteins for growth and repair, they need those fats for insulation and cell membrane formation, and they need a whole range of vitamins and minerals to keep healthy. The amount that different organisms require these things in depend on the organism. There's two different ways that our organisms can obtain this nutrition. Heterotrophs, they consume foods. So most of our animals are heterotrophs. Autotrophs, they produce their own food. Now, all plants are autotrophs. You will say, what about that Venus flytrap? But the Venus flytrap only gets vitamins and minerals from the flies it captures. The actual plant is an autotroph. Okay, so all biotic living organisms grow from a young organism through to an old organism, and through this time there's psychological changes. So you need to think of life cycles, okay? And if you have a look at the bottom there, we've got the life cycle of our ladybug. So animals tend to develop from an embryo through to an adult. Our plants from the seedling to the adult plant or the mature plant. Okay, response. Now, all living organisms respond to external and internal conditions, whether that be danger on the outside, so that fight or flight, whether it be temperature variations, internal or external, water levels, okay, internal water levels, sunlight, especially for our plants, and metabolic factors such as blood sugar levels, again, those water levels there with the metabolic factors. Now, in Mrs. Gren, we have the S for sensitivity, which covers some of this, that reaction to danger and any of the external factors. So if you're looking at Mrs. Gren, this is where the S comes into it. You'll see there we've got our picture of the plant in the top corner. That plant has wilted, okay? So it draws all of its water carrying pipes in, and they wilt if they don't have enough water in. Okay, our next one, excretion, shared by both Mrs. Gren and Mr. Engro. All living organisms need to remove waste from the chemical reactions that occur within their cells. So we call these metabolic reactions. Now, this can be done in various ways. It depends what the waste product is. So first of all, we breathe out waste gases. Plants release waste gases from their leaves. So we call that expiring, so that release of waste gases. Okay, these gases can be from respiration, but they're also from other metabolic reactions. Sweating and urination is a way that we release other waste chemicals that we've filtered out of our blood. Okay, plants lose waste chemicals in their leaves when they shed their leaves in winter time. Okay, and they also remove some waste through their roots. So excretion is the removal of waste from metabolic reactions. Mrs. Gren has respiration as one of her R's. Okay, and so that does cover some of excretion. So the respiration is a process where living organisms use glucose or a carbohydrate plus oxygen to release energy, okay, in the process of respiration. So all living organisms respire, and by having excretion in Mr. Engro, it is just saying that you're recognizing that respiration exists because it's a metabolic reaction. Waste. All living organisms remove waste from the digestion of their food. I'm talking poo, I'm talking feces. Now, I'm also talking leaves, dead leaves on our tree, like we've got there. And you'll see there one of my favourite creatures of all time, the dung beetle. Believe me, without dung beetles, there'd be a lot of poo on this planet. But all living organisms have to remove waste from the digestion of their food. Okay, so different processes depending on what the organism, but they need to get rid of that waste or they'll explode. Finally, all living organisms require water. Okay, it's the universal solvent. Everything in living organisms is dissolved in water. All right, plants require water for photosynthesis. That's how they create their glucose ready for respiration. And most metabolic reactions will require the presence of water, either for their reactants to be in solution or water actually as part of the process. So as the universal solvent, there would be no life on Earth without water. Now, if you decide to carry on your studies in biology, so if you continue on to senior school with biology, you'll probably look at the characteristics of life in a bit more depth. And at that stage, we're talking of those characteristics of life as all organisms being made of cells. All organisms have some kind of homeostasis. This is how organisms maintain their internal environment. All organisms are exposed, probably not the right word, but hereditary. Okay, so when they reproduce, genetics are passed from one organism to the next. All living organisms require energy. They all use energy, so they all must respire. All living organisms need to reproduce. All living organisms have a response to the environment around them, and so that's an immediate response happening at that time. And all living organisms evolve and adapt to suit their environmental conditions. So that is all from Mr. Engro, Mrs. Gren, and myself. I hope to see you in our next video.